I've never actually done a show like this one before. This is the best players in fantasy drafts that are one event away from being fantasy relevant or possibly fantasy gold. What's happening, everybody? Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's your Wednesday afternoon edition of the show as we continue pumping out at least 10 shows a week right now leading up to the start of the NBA campaign. I'm Dan Vespris at Dan Vespris on social media. You can also follow the network at Old Man Squad on Twitter, at Old Man Squad on Nope, that's not right. TikTok, at Old Man Squad Fantasy on Instagram. I know I should have gotten the same one at all three, but I'm new to this business and I'm trying to figure it out on the fly, so cut me some damn slack. Please, before we get going, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe. If you want to drop a comment, that's also helpful for getting this thing into the algorithm. And if you're listening after the fact, subscribe and leave a 5-star review. What the hell does it mean to be one away? Well, I suppose I should probably enumerate, elucidate. We're going to do a whole bunch of things on today's show. But the main thing is we're going to get into a class of players that has a specific, this is very Liam Neeson, but a specific set of skills, not specialist style, but a skill set that allows the player to move up in the team's pecking order under myriad circumstances. This is not a handcuff show. We might actually do a handcuff show, but those are mostly going to be point guards and centers. This is a little bit the opposite. These are guys like, trying to think of a good example from last year. Al Horford was this guy last year. Whenever anyone was hurt on the Celtics, Horford got the bump from sixth man, where he was ranked about 115, 120, something like that, to fifth man. It didn't matter who went down. Point guard, shooting guard, small forward, power forward, center. He jumped into the starting lineup, and he was a top 50 fantasy producer when he did so. It's not always that good. Max Strus, who may or may not make an appearance on this year's episode, was, top 120 when a team was healthy. It was very hot at the beginning of the season, so there's sort of this, inaccurate assessment of what he ended up being. And then he went through a prolonged cold spell that didn't always coincide with which stars were there around him. But he got a few extra shots when Darius Garland was down, when Donovan Mitchell was down. He went from fantasy, what I've referred to on the podcast for a year or two as doesn't matter zone, which is like top 125 types, 130. Like, you could start him, you could not start him, it doesn't really matter. He moved up closer to the edge of the top 100, which is still not exciting, but fantasy startable in most formats. So that's this type. The guy who goes from being outside fantasy startable to inside of it through, whether does that mean do they get to the edge of the top 110, or do they jump all the way to Al Horford last year territory? Well, we'll talk about that as we go through the names on the show. This episode of Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. Think you know your stuff? Get in on the $200,000 mega contest and pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at prizes and a share of $200,000. And when the game's over, roll on into the casino, play some blackjack, poker, unwind with over 150 slot games. Head to the website today to get in on the action. That's BetOnline. The game starts here. So again, a little more on what it means to be this one next man up. I've also referred to this group of players as being one away, however you want to frame it. These guys are terrific plug-and-play options. Oftentimes, you get multiple games of good value out of them. They're outstanding for games cap leagues where when they get that opportunity, you just drop them in, and when they don't have that opportunity, you can sit them. Or because they sort of fluctuate between being just outside of fantasy value and being inside of it, they become kind of solid head-to-head style compilers where they just, by the end of the year, you've got 70 some odd games of this player putting up okay numbers, but all together not taking zeros. that ends up being somewhat useful as well. But let's get going with the list. First name on the list, and this is in order of their pre-rank on the Yahoo board, is Dosunmu at number 119. He is not my favorite name on this board, but he is a player that showed the ability to post really nice fantasy lines last season when given a little bit more opportunity to do so. The problem, of course, for Dosunmu heading into this season is that, yes, DeMar DeRozan is gone, but it sounds like Lonzo Ball is going to try to play. They brought in Josh Giddey. Kobe White is in the backcourt. Zach LaVine is back and plays a smaller position on the floor than DeRozan played anyway. That's a lot of players. I would argue about 5 that are vying for the, you call it like the bottom 3 minutes on the floor. Point guard, shooting guard, and then some of the small forward. So if we're liberal with the minute estimate, you're talking about 144 minutes to distribute among those 5 guys, and then like you're going to flip a few to other dudes as well. But again, let's just make it as easy as possible here. Now we have to remember the starters in that group are likely Giddey, White, and LaVine. So let's assume those guys get at least 30 minutes apiece. Call it 32 apiece for those 3 guys, which I think is a reasonable number. I think we can probably almost etch that in stone. That's 96, which leaves only 48 remaining minutes for Dosunmu and Lonzo Ball. Does that mean Lonzo gets 20 and Dosunmu gets 28? Probably not, because you're going to have someone like a Javon Carter that sees action every once in a while. I think he's still on the team if I'm remembering right. They've got a couple of young guys floating around in there. They'll run small from time to time. They'll run big from time to time. It's not going to be so simple. So we're talking about Dosunmu probably getting some number of minutes in the mid-20s to start the year. Unfortunately, that ain't enough. By the way, Patrick Williams is also presumably going to get in the mix at some point this season too. Dosunmu was awesome down the stretch last year, and it's a big reason why he's actually even remotely close to like the getting drafted board. But the problem, of course, is not only does he need minutes, but he needs some usage. He's a good percentages guy. His steals and blocks are fine, but not, I wouldn't call them spectacular. But last season was this sort of tale of 2 episodes for Dosunmu. First half of the year, he was playing about 22 minutes a game. Second half of the year, he was playing 36, and he was top 65 in that amount. And that is what you're looking for with the next man up. Would I draft Dosunmu? No, I'm not sitting on him because I think we need someone getting moved, and there's all these stories coming out over the last, frankly, 24 hours talking about how Zach LaVine is fully bought in, and they're going to shoehorn minutes to Giddey and Kobe White, and they've got to make LaVine look like he's tradable. So Dosunmu's not going to see 30 minutes unless one of those guys is done, whether it's a LaVine trade or an injury or whatever. That's how you get him back up near closer to 30. Somebody needs to go down. And I would argue it's almost anyone out of not only just those 5 guys, well, 4 other guys, but also you talk about, more the power forward guys as well. Because if those dudes go down, you start to slide bodies up the board. Smaller players play bigger spots on the court, and it just opens up more minutes in the backcourt. So Dosunmu needs one guy to go down to get himself inside that top 100. He is the first name on this board, and one that I think you can probably just take a wait and see with. Cam Johnson at 120 is an intriguing one, and one that maybe makes a better case for actually drafting and sitting. And I'm not I want to say I'm hyper into Cam Johnson because we saw last year that he was perfectly happy to take a tertiary role on a team that wasn't even all that good. Second half last year, Cam Johnson played 26 minutes a game. He was ranked number 126. I think it's a little bit of short-term memory situation going on here to forget that when Johnson saw full starters minutes and actually had the confidence to take shots, he had a potential to go top 70 or better. That Brooklyn team is without Mikal Bridges. That opens things up a little bit, but I still feel like Johnson is one thing away, whatever that might be. Dorian Finney-Smith getting moved or Dennis Schroeder getting moved. Cam Thomas is probably not getting moved, but some ball handler /chucker /whatever needs to be, maybe it's a Cam Thomas minor injury, medium injury. I don't know. But there are a number of different ways that this thing gets unlocked, that Cam Johnson goes from being sort of like the fringy 115, 120 range per game guy. And if you suddenly move him from 9.5 shots a game, which is where he was at the second half last year, to a dozen, okay, now you're a top 75 guy again. So of the players on today's show, Cam Johnson is one of the ones that has a higher ceiling because we've seen him do it. We know it's in there somewhere. His body doesn't hold up all that well to the rigors of an NBA campaign, but it's not impossible. Like, think about not this past season, but the prior one. Cam Johnson split his time between Phoenix and Brooklyn. He averaged 28.5 minutes a game, took 11 shots a night, and he was number 54. Now, he missed half the season with a meniscus injury, but he was at 15.5 points, 2.5 threes, 4.5 boards, 2 assists, 1.2 steals. Pretty good percentages, actually, and ultra low turnovers, so a nice little 9-cap bump for him as well. It's not out of the question to think that Cam Johnson could be around top 100 when that team is fully healthy, and if one player gets out of the way, he could be top 50. So Cam Johnson is one of my favorites in the one-away board, and for Roto, he actually makes sense as, like an 11th, 12th round pick because of that opportunity to kind of sit on him for a little bit, see how things are going. If they're going well, you can throw him into your lineup with a healthy Nets roster, and if they're not, you can sit on him, wait to see what happens. I mean, if he gets moved, obviously that detonates the whole thing, but there are so many pathways to him getting to more. Norman Powell at number 141. I made this list before the Kawhi Leonard news came out, so we're going to sort of double handicap the Norman Powell thing. Powell is not a diverse fantasy player in that he scored 14 points in 26 minutes a game last year and almost nothing else. His percentages were fine, but unspectacular. Turnovers were exceptionally low, and he hit 2 3-pointers a game. So I guess that was a small positive as well. But now we know Kawhi Leonard probably not going to be ready to start the year. And the one thing I'm seeing, and look, I'm not drafting Kawhi after the news came out, and I said that on a YouTube short we put out as well. I just, unless he starts going 2.5 3 rounds later, I don't think I'm taking the plunge on Kawhi. But it's also important to remember he didn't just get ruled out for the season. So everybody's like, "Oh, I gotta go get Norm Powell. I gotta get him right away." I mean, here's the thing: when Kawhi's healthy, and James Harden is also healthy, Norman Powell wasn't good last year when one of the big three guys was out. Kawhi, Paul George last year, or James Harden. Powell was still bad. He needed 2 of those guys to be out to become fantasy relevant. Meaning, if we start this season and Kawhi's not there, you might get a couple weeks of Norman Powell putting up better numbers. But he needs to have a ton of shots to get there because he just doesn't do all that many things. So he would have been, I should say, a true one-away guy. But now we've got this Kawhi Leonard injury stuff that's creating a little bit of a nebulous situation around him. He's going to start going earlier in drafts also. Like, prior to the Kawhi news, Norman Powell was a guy you could take in the 14th, 15th round if you wanted. My guess is that he's going to start going in the 10th or 11th once the whole thing kind of settles. And that might honestly be a little bit too early for me. I still think you can get some pretty good players in the 10th round. The 11th gets a little bit murky. And I don't think you're going to want to use Powell when Kawhi and Harden are both in there, which I still think is going to happen, 45, 55 times this year. Kawhi's probably going to miss somewhere between 20 and 25 ball games. Harden's going to miss a few. I don't know if they're going to overlap or not. Those games will be great for Norman. So, again, like Roto Games Cap style, if you wanted to draft Powell and deploy him at the beginning of the season, or frankly, head-to-head, the same thing. Just treat him like a hot free agent pickup in head-to-head, and when Kawhi comes back, you could potentially drop him, or you could just take the crummy lines and hope that you get a good game when Kawhi sits. Head-to-head, I'd probably draft him 12th round and just play him until Kawhi starts to get in there for like 2 out of every 3 ball games. Roto, you could probably draft him 11th round, play him until Kawhi comes back, and then drop him in there during all the back-to-backs that Kawhi is going to sit and whatever other nagging injuries pop up for those 2 guys. You probably get, I mean, we don't know how long Kawhi might miss at the beginning of the season. It could be 1 game. It could be 15. But over the rest of the year, I think you can safely assume that either Harden or Kawhi or both of those guys are probably going to miss another 15 to 20 games at some point between them, maybe more. And you can start Powell probably in all of those. So if you use a roster spot in Roto on that, you might get 35 starts out of Powell this year. But on head-to-head, I don't think you're going to want him in your lineup the other almost 50 times. Klay Thompson at 143 might very well be my favorite example of this player. Not to say that he's my favorite one on this list, but he is like, if there was going to be a logo for the one-away club this year, I believe that it's Klay Thompson. And some people might tell me I'm crazy. They might say that Klay's going to be good enough without the one-away. I disagree. Klay's not really Klay anymore. Steals are, which were never great, are extremely low. Field goal percent has fallen off a cliff. And, I mean, you saw it late last year. The Warriors realized that he just didn't have juice left, and they went young. This, mind you, was a Klay Thompson who was ranked right around number 100 on 15 shots a game. I don't think he's getting 15 shots on a healthy Mavs roster. 12 to 14 is probably the number for him. You know, you can look at what like Tim Hardaway Jr. did last year, which was not a whole lot. I mean, Klay's better than Tim Hardaway, so don't get my words too twisted on that one. I just think that Klay Thompson is a guy who's going to probably get about 13 shots a game, which puts him somewhere in the like 130 rank territory, 115 to 145 probably, which is not really a guy I'm all that interested in starting in almost any format. Head-to-head, you can drop him in there, and it's like, fine, he's not really killing my team anywhere. Blah. Roto, that's not enough. Roto, you want guys that are posting double-digit value or better. 99 or better is what you're hunting for. I don't think Klay has almost any chance at 99 or better unless magically his field goal percent fixes itself season over season in these new digs. Like maybe he comes in with a chip on his shoulder and just has a better shooting season. Maybe Luka gets him so open that all the fact that he looks like he's playing in a vat of molasses goes away. It's possible. But again, we play the odds on here at the Old Man Squad. We play the odds. But the beauty of Klay Thompson this year, since I've already gone on and on and on about all the reasons that I don't want him on my team, the one really big reason that I do is that Kyrie Irving, Luka Doncic aren't coming close to playing 82 games this year. Luka played 70 last season, and I think that was good. But these dudes went to the finals. And Luka, who couldn't even really muster his way through an Olympic situation, like already missed a dozen. Kyrie missed 24, double the number of games that Luka missed last year. And again, some of those may be overlap. But if you draft Klay Thompson, you're probably getting 25 to 40 starts in fantasy, meaning you're probably getting 25 to 40 games where one of Kyrie or Luka is not there, or both. I don't know what the number's going to be. Could be, I guess it could be a little bit lower, but odds are it's higher. So now you're taking a Klay Thompson that's probably ranked in the 130 some odd range when the team's fully healthy, and you're putting him with a different iteration of Klay Thompson that's probably ranked in the 60 to 85 range when one of those dudes is out. Because, I mean, we know this about Klay. He ain't going to be bashful about taking the extra shots on the table. Like, just look at Klay's numbers throughout his career and how it translates to fantasy value. One of the big things, of course, is that prior to all of his injuries, he was able to put up a number of seasons where he was shooting in the, like, 44 to 49% range, bouncing around a little bit, and obviously better as the Warriors got better. But then these last couple of years post-injury, 43, 43.5, 43, pretty consistently down. 3-point percent, also pretty consistently down. Steals, consistently down. But look at field goal attempts. Screw the rest of it. Just assume the field goal percent is going to be worse. Field goal attempts were down from 18 to 15 from last year to this year. That's the really, really big thing to watch on Klay Thompson. Because last year, he was number 66, not this past season, the prior one, on 18 shots a game, even with the bad field goal percent. When that came down to 15 shots, he was number 99. If it goes down to 13 shots, he's outside the top 100. When one of those stars is down for the Mavs, his 13 shots is probably going to be more like 18 shots. Because there aren't that many other guys on the team that want to go chuck up a bunch of buckets. PJ Washington will take a few. And then lots of role players, some good centers, et cetera, et cetera. It's going to be Klay. So what do you think? Does Luka miss 14 games? Does Kyrie miss 18? Is that 32? It's a little overlap. You get what, like 30? Klay Thompson, top 65 type performances. That's great for Games Cap Roto. And if you get 35 of those, and let's say he misses, 10, 12 games himself, so another 35 where he's number 130, Klay Thompson might finish this year just inside or right around the edge of the top 100, but with half the year as a 6th rounder and half the year as an 11th rounder. Roto, you know which ones you want. Head to head, you could just sort of use them all. So the poster child. Grayson Allen at number 147. He had a really good season last year. I don't think we should forget about that, but the Suns also got deeper. He was number 58. He had an all-world shooting year that probably doesn't stick season over season. And he's going to lose part of his job to Tyus Jones, who's going to come in, play point guard, where the Suns were like, finally, we can let our superstars not be the point guard. And Grayson Allen is probably going to come off the bench unless they renege on what they were talking about earlier, thinking that Tyus Jones was going to be the starter. Either way, it's one more body fighting for the role player minutes. And if you take minutes and shots and opportunity away from Allen, his value falls fast because he was a positive in all the percentages. And no matter how many minutes you played him, his turnovers didn't really change all that much. Fewer minutes is fewer points, fewer threes, fewer assists, fewer steals, fewer blocks, less positive impact from field goal and free throw percent. It just hurts. It just hurts. Like a lot. At least with like a points league type of guy, maybe you could, not in a points league, I just mean guy that stinks at percentages. Maybe you could at least argue that less of a bad thing. But everything for Grayson Allen, the more he did, the better his value was. So this is a guy, in my opinion, that probably falls to just outside the top 100 due to a diminished role and a probably diminished performance. But we saw it last year. This is an easy handicap. If one of these guys goes down, we see the Grayson Allen of last year, which was top 60. And even if you dial the shooting percentages down, that probably still puts him in the 80 to 90 range or 80 to 100. However, with Grayson Allen, because I think there's a little bit of a boring element to it, I don't know that I would draft him in most formats. I think he's more of what we like to call on the show a burger board guy, where someone goes down, literally anyone. Could be Royce O'Neal, Tyus Jones, Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. Any of those guys goes down, and you dump somewhere from 20 to 35 minutes back into the pool. Grayson Allen picks up 5 or 6 of those. He's back to being fantasy relevant again. But to me, that's more of a short-term play. I'd rather pick up Allen when that moment happens as opposed to starting with him on my team and waiting it out. And that's kind of the difference here is like, Grayson Allen probably not going to be that amazing on opening night. But who the hell did we just talk about a minute ago? I already forgot the name. But we just talked about somebody that probably is. Norman Powell. Rather use the pick there and get off to a quick start. Tari Eason is the next name on the board. I actually think there's a chance he could push top 100 even when the Rockets are healthy. But his minutes are probably going to be stuck in the 20 to 24 range when the Rockets are healthy. And that's going to make it hard for him to be consistently fantasy relevant. despite the really nice rebounding and steals numbers for Eason on a per minute basis. But again, we're talking about if Dylan Brooks goes down, if Jalen Green goes down, if Amen Thompson goes down, if Reed Shepherd, probably you could throw him in there, goes down, if Jabari Smith Jr. goes down, if Alperen Sengun goes down, maybe not Freddie VanVleet. But I think you could argue that there's like a solid 5 or 6 guys that are all going to be fighting for similar minutes on this Rockets team. And if any of them goes down and everybody else gets 6 extra minutes, ta-da, Tari Eason, that's freaking sweet. I think there's a case to be made that you could potentially draft Eason just to see what his role looks like on opening night, because maybe he is like a top 110, 115 guy right out of the chute on the shoulders of those rebounds and steals. I don't think you're going to be missing a ton if you don't. But again, we're talking about, 12th, 13th, 14th rounders at this point. So what do you have to lose here? And again, there are a lot of ways that he slides into top 100 or better valuation, and that's good. I like that. He's probably not going to be like a top 50 guy, because you'd probably need a few guys to get out of the way, and then there just have to be all this usage that comes to a guy who's not really a usage monster. But there are more ways to get him there, but the end point probably isn't as exciting type of one-away dudes. Who's next? Max Strus at 158, arguably the most boring name on this board. We mentioned him during the opener of the show. Strus is going to be around 125 to 140 when that Cavs team is healthy. If he goes on a heater, he could put up some top 65 to top 100 range stuff. But if Donovan Mitchell or Darius Garland goes down for any extended stretch, you could drop Strus into your lineup and probably expect top 100 play for as long as those guys are down. You do not need to draft him. He's a pick-up and play type. But I wanted to put him on the board because he's a guy that, again, there are a few different ways. And the next name on the list is actually going to be same exact note, just rinse and repeat. There are a few ways that this works out. And Strus is a starter, so it's not like he needs to bump into the starting lineup to get there. It's just about getting more stuff to do. An absence, by the way, of Evan Mobley would also help him a little bit, because then you see more rebounding out of Strus. And it's maybe less about the extra shots for him as it is like Garland goes down, he'll get a few extra assists. Mobley goes down, he'll get a couple extra rebounds. Donovan Mitchell goes down, he'll get a few extra assists and a couple extra shots. So again, there's a lot of ways for him to get to that 100 range type of performance, but that isn't a massive needle mover. So don't draft him. Let it play. And then here's Caris LeVert, his teammate, who's more of a low percentages, like needs a bunch of shots type. And it's conceivable that he might even be more of a two-away guy, but we've seen it before. When he gets going on a little run, and it happens every once in a while, it only typically happens when either Garland or Mitchell is down, but he jumps and just sort of falls right into their role. Might even continue to come off the bench, but all of a sudden, 11 shots becomes 14 kind of thing. His upside is capped because his percentages stink and his turnovers tend to be not terrible, but not good. It's not a source of pride, but he'll get you points, boards, and assists and some steals in that fill-in spot, and then you just have to hope you kind of catch him on a good percentages day. But he's a similar thing to Strus. You definitely don't need to draft him. It's better to just go pick up mode. And frankly, because of the percentages, sometimes I just opt not to do it anyway on LeVert. Getting near the end of the board, and I like this picture, so if you're watching on YouTube, I hope you enjoy this one as well, is a wincing Duncan Robinson at 227, who has shown time and again on an injury-riddled Heat team, himself included, when one of the key guys is out, it can't be a peripheral dude, he'll jump into that starting lineup and take 9 3-pointers a game for a couple of weeks. And it's not beautiful, and his upside is capped because he doesn't do much besides take and sometimes make 3-pointers. But he can go on those top 100 runs with 4 3-pointers a game and get you, 16 to 23s for a couple of weeks in a row before basically disappearing again. He is, like Strus, like LeVert, not at all a guy you need to draft. Even now, almost a month away, a little less than a month away from the season, you're not going to be missing anything. And his role is going to be crap when the season opens because they've got Rozier and Hero and Butler and Bam all a part of things. But as those guys drop, and it's possible that with Rozier around, maybe Robinson is also like LeVert, more of a two-away kind of guy where we need more than one player out. But he's at least a guy to keep an eye on when someone goes down. And you know you're going to get some three-pointers. So, put him in the camp. And finally, the deepest name on the board at number 382 is Noah Clowney. He is a similar explanation to Cam Johnson. But the path is different. Meaning, not the path to get to value. The path to get to value is someone gets moved in front of him. And it actually could be Cam Johnson to get Clowney into a little bit more role. Dorian Finney-Smith would be the simpler solution here. But Clowney's a guy who's likely to go from not all that close to fantasy value to a ton of it. Because he's the biggest beneficiary when a power forward leaves, as opposed to who we mentioned, Cam Johnson. Like, anybody moves, anybody that takes any shots on that team goes away, and Cam Johnson takes an extra 1 or 2 shots per ball game, and that's how he gets to value. Noah Clowney specifically needs one of the guys who plays his position to be gone. So it's a little bit more handcuffy, but not, because those guys are on the trade block. Those guys are not building blocks, and you're not taking the backup in the far-fetched chance that the starter goes down. You're taking Noah Clowney on September 25th, or whenever you're listening to this podcast, with hope that sometime between now and opening night, Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith gets moved. Those two would be the simplest answer to this. And then Clowney goes from playing 20 minutes to 30. He goes from being outside the top 140 to top 75 or better, because he has a very diverse fantasy game, kind of the opposite of the Norman Powell numbers from earlier. A guy that does 2 things. Clowney does a bunch. Noah Clowney is a guy where if you're holding your fantasy draft really early, you take him with your last round pick and you sit on him until October 21st. And then you look and you see, did Brooklyn clear out any runway for him? And if they didn't, I mean, you could hold a little longer if you really wanted to, but you probably can move on right before opening night. If you're holding your draft 2 days before the season starts, then you probably don't draft Clowney, provided the Brooklyn roster is the same then as it is right now. He's a guy that's a draft and stash during the offseason, but probably not a guy I draft and stash once games are happening, because who knows when these guys get moved for Brooklyn. It could be the first week of the season. It could be February. If it happens the first week of the season and you just dropped Clowney, you're going to be very upset with yourself. But the likelier odds are you sit on him week after week after week, wondering when the hell he's going to get traded. You finally pull the trigger on a drop, and then he gets traded 2 days later, because we know that's how it goes in fantasy. So you've got 2 options. Option number 1 is you hold indefinitely. That's going to hurt your team, but you won't feel dumb if a trade ever goes down. You'll be there and you'll already have him. The other side is, I forget what, was that a candy bar commercial? I forget, when the kid gets the no regrets tattoo and it's spelled wrong. You operate in a no regrets Noah Clowney environment where you draft now and drop the day before the season if he doesn't have a job, and you just don't think twice about it. This is what I'm going to do. If he gets traded 3 days in, it's okay. I didn't know when he was going to be traded. I made a pact with myself, a no regrets pact, that I was going to drop him and not do the waiting game. But if you do anything in between, you're going to kill yourself with this whole thing. You're going to be like, I can't drop now. I've held him for 3 weeks. I can't drop now. I've held him for 7 weeks. And suddenly you're going to squat on a player who might not get the job ever. Like, we never know what these teams are going to do. Teams get so caught up in getting proper return for their players that then they end up not trading them, and then they really look like dum-dums. Brooklyn is going into a rebuild. We know this. They should take almost anything for these guys, but that's just not how the game works. They want to wait and see if they can squeeze a little more out of other teams. Can we get one more second-round pick? Can we get a little bit more out of this playoff hunting team that really needs a tough guy power forward like Dorian Finney-Smith? Can we get more in February when a team realizes that they're a piece away than in November when a team's like, we don't really know what the hell we are right now. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait. And you wait, and wait, and wait. And then you end up pulling your hair out. So that's why I think you kind of got to go one way or the other. You either go no regrets, or you hold the whole way through. Here are the names once again. At the end, we like to go recap mode because I know it's easy to get lost in whatever's going on with this thing. Where did my mouse go? Oh, no, it's happened again. Oh, shoot. All right, here's the recap. I'll try to find my mouse before the show's over, but the cursor disappeared. Dosunmu at 119. Cam Johnson at 120. Norman Powell at 141. Klay Thompson at 143. Grayson Allen at 147. Tari Eason at 152. Max Strus at 158. Caris LeVert at 169. Duncan Robinson at 227. And Noah Stash Me Now Clowney at 382. Favorite ones on the board: Norman Powell, because he'll likely start the year with a flourish. Cam Johnson, because he has a chance to have some value, even if there isn't a guy moved. Klay Thompson, because he's going to have a lot of opportunity when Luka and Kyrie are sitting. Grayson Allen and Dosunmu are kind of in the similar camp for me in terms of being like the true one-aways, where they're not great right now, but could be pretty good with one thing happening. Tari Eason is the next name on the board for me there. That's one I like. And then Clowney in the stash now. And then Strus, LeVert, and Robinson are very much the just pick them up when the time is right. And there's the mouse cursor again. Thanks, mouse cursor. All right, we're going to knock this down so that you guys can see my face and I can get my cursor back. I'm Dan Vespris. Again, thanks so much for watching, everybody. This was the one-aways episode from Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Shout out once again to our pals at Bet Online and at the Believe Network for helping hook all of this cool stuff up. Follow me on Twitter at Dan Vespers. Follow the network at Old Man Squad on Twitter and TikTok, at Old Man Squad Fantasy over on Instagram. We're just going to do shorts on those two platforms for now. But someone, a younger someone, is probably going to teach me all the things that I'm doing wrong on them so that I can be Steve Buscemi in the Hello Fellow Young People meme, which I kind of am already. Tomorrow, we're back. Of course, we're back. We don't take a day off. That's absurd. Tomorrow, I believe we've got a guest. We do have a guest. Should I tell you? Yeah, it's Josh. We're talking to Josh Lloyd. Oh, yes. Locked On Fantasy Basketball, Josh Lloyd. He'll be breaking down some mock results with us from my industry 9-cap mock that we held in a slow draft over the last couple of weeks. And that'll be the start of about 10 or 11 of those episodes that'll be pockmarked over the next 2-ish to 3 weeks of episodes of this show. Should be a lot of fun to sort of crack the seal on breaking down that mock draft with Josh tomorrow. We will also potentially do a mock draft tomorrow if the time allows. I don't know. Maybe we'll go to Bed Bath & Beyond. In any event, I want to thank you guys again for watching. I'm Dan for Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. See you tomorrow.